Who do I call if it ain't you? Tell me who to call if it ain't you.
So happy to have you on here. You have no idea how many people are like, food's on the mind right now.
Right. I can understand. Yeah, I'm just
Totally.
gonna adjust a little of my, there we go, so I
Yeah.
could get my head in. Okay, there. Hi, there I am.
All right, all right. So I'm just gonna do a really quick bio intro. I'm sure a lot of you have already seen the post, but for people that are spilling in, Daphne, can you pronounce your middle name for me so I don't fuck it up?
Thanks for asking. Yes,
Yeah.
can you hear me okay, by the way?
Oh yeah, you're
Oh,
great.
great. Okay, it's Kauahi'ilani. So it's Kauahi'ilani.
Kauahi'ilani. Kauahi'ilani.
Yes.
Beautiful. Okay. Daphne Kauahi'ilani Jenkins is an insatiably curious nerd and foodie, finishing her Master of Science in Nutrition program at National University of Natural Medicine. Yes, we love an educated queen. She will soon be launching UMAUMA and offering an intersectional approach to nutrition counseling, food relationship coaching, and culinary art explorations. And I'm sure a lot of you already have questions about what all of this is. So let's just pop off with our first question.
Yes.
We want to know, what is nutrition and what is food relationship counseling?
Oh, good. Good question. Okay. So this is a great opportunity for me to sort of talk about what I've learned to be a problematic aspect of nutrition. And that is, it's this new science and it's a reductionist science. So it likes to break things down into the nitty-gritty and be like, okay, let's focus on vitamins, minerals, and specific kinds of nutrients. And this can be helpful sometimes, and it can also be problematic and become sort of something that lends itself to more obsession about minutia. So nutrition can be handy for certain people to help with diseases or to management support, etc., but not always for everyone.
Got it.
And so food relationship counseling is less of that reductionist science and more of the psychology, art, sociology, the people stuff, the community exploration about food and its meaning to people in their lives.
Right. So it's your personal relationship to food.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And both would be centered on the individual involved.
Okay, got it.
Mm-hmm.
When would you think it's appropriate to work with a nutritionist? Because I think something that a lot of people have brought up is that nutrition is often associated with weight loss. And so we want to know, like, I think you started a little bit about this, but what can nutrition be used as a tool for if it's not about weight loss?
Ooh. So one of the things, I'll speak for my own experience. That's the only thing I can claim.
Totally.
And for me, nutrition was helpful for sort of zeroing in on deficiencies that I personally had because of my disordered eating, that I wasn't really aware that I was disordered because I was just kind of eating according to what I saw influencers eating, or I swim in the same water as everyone else. So popular culture was really influencing me. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do this right. There's a right and a wrong way, and I'm going to be right. And what happened over time is just sticking to one rigid way of eating. What it resulted in were some actual deficiencies, which popped up in different symptoms that I had.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
So, mm-hmm.
And what was the process like to be able to figure out the right way to eat specifically for your situation?
So this is such an awesome question because we are ever changing.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's not exactly the most assuring thing to talk about right now because we're like in a state of and flux.
Sure.
Many of us with an abrupt transition to this quarantining life. But the truth is that we grow and we change, and so might our needs. So it's an ongoing journey.
It's an ongoing process.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. No, that's really good for you to talk about, because I know that from my personal experience, you know, depending on how you were raised, you grew up thinking certain foods are what you need to eat, probably because your community or your family told you that that was what you needed. And you don't ever really second guess that. And I know that for me, as I'm getting older, my
Mm.
needs are changing, my body's changing, and my bodily response to certain foods is totally different than it was when I was younger. So I'm definitely in that zone. Um, okay, so how would you describe the difference between having a healthy relationship with food and having one that's a little more, I guess I want to say like distorted? I know for me personally, I am an emotional eater, and something that I've been struggling with for many years. And I definitely learned that I'm Latina, so a lot of us are emotional eaters. We learned that from our moms or our grandmothers. How can you, especially during this time, since we're so introspective, like we're looking into ourselves and learning how to better ourselves, like what are the signs that I can look for in order to say like, hey, maybe this isn't really like a healthy thing for me?
These are really great deep questions. And I want to sort of again say that it depends on the individual. And you gave me a great little bit of teensy bit of background about yourself, your experiences, and how that lives in you. And I
Yes.
think that's what I'd be really careful about, rather than giving like an overall, well, you know, you're emotionally eating if it's going to be different for different people. And first, let me just say that eating for comfort and emotional eating in and of itself is normative. Like it's we from birth, soothing by feeding and like having oxytocin release and dopamine release because we are being fed and soothed and comforted is how we are as humans. And we have these responses to our pets, to hugs, you know, and it's so
True.
in the same way, it's like saying I'm an emotional hugger. Like yeah, I get a response from hugging people.
Yeah.
It's comforting. So I want to just see you and see and say that it's, I want to say it's totally normal, but I feel like that even that phrase is kind of problematic, but it's, that's who we are. It's totally human. It's
Yeah.
human and it's okay. And I would say that when things start to feel more restrictive,
Okay.
obsessive, to me, that might be an indicator that you want support or you want to check in with someone else and be like, am I like, what's going on here?
Right.
For me, I think a driving force with nutrition counseling or food relationship coaching would be a sense of expansion, liberation, growth, the ability to move about the world with joy. These
Right.
are things that I would be wanting to cultivate and help my clients with supporting and cultivating in themselves.
That makes sense, because you want every part of your life to be a joyful experience. We have a quote. It says,
Yes, Prisket and gravy. That's your sis.
I was depressed and had pasta the other day and it felt like a big hug. Yes.
Ding, ding, ding. Yes. And that's really what many of us emotionally are needing right now.
Mhm.
And I think I would really like to invite that in of like, let's suspend the judgment and let's just, this is an unprecedented time. So it's really not the time to be like getting out your like microscope and being like, what am I eating and how am I being and bad, good. It's really not the time for this. We have like bigger
Bigger
fish to
things
fry.
to I want to take this time to let everybody know that is on the live stream right now that if you have a question for either of us, please comment down below or click on the question mark down there. We'll both be able to see your question and we'll get to it. I want to know what inspired you to get into nutrition? Like what was the motivating factor that got you here?
So going back to like childhood, babyhood, I
Yes.
was always curious and I lived in a family of really foodie people, great cooks. Every one of my caregivers cooked.
Love.
Grandma, grandpa, mom, dad. Okay.
Yeah.
And so there was this real sweet spot of childhood where it felt like I was surrounded by flavors from different cultures, Chinese, Hawaiian, like all kinds of American influence. We would explore different cuisines. I would have extended family potlucks with my ohana, and our plates would be full of everything from Filipino, Chinese, Japanese, all kinds of foods. And that was so my palate was primed, my interest, my curiosity was primed then. And then as an adolescent, something shifted. You know, I think it's pretty common for many female identified or femme people when they hit puberty, there's this all of a sudden it's like instead of just being, now I'm going to be and be seen. And where do I fit in there? And who do I need to look like to be seen or accepted? And I went through that just like everyone else. And that's really when the consciousness about like perhaps there's a best way or better way or good or bad way to eat is.
Right.
And it really hit peak fucked upness when I started my journey toward motherhood and tried to get pregnant. And I had recurrent miscarriages, and I was convinced that it must be because there's a better way I could be eating. So that's what really drew me to nutrition. Is I was like, there's got to be a silver bullet, a magic bullet. I really got to find it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to become a testimony. I'm going to have this, you know, get everything I want from this way of eating. And boy, I learned a lot.
Yeah.
About how problematic those thoughts were and about my own relationship with food.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So do you think that it was that moment? It sounds like you've been on this journey your entire life.
It feels like it.
You were born for this.
Well, it feels good to be here now.
Yeah. Priscilla wants to know, what about when, as in times of the day to eat?
Okay. So again, I'm gonna keep saying it depends on the individual. And it also, I know there's a lot out there about intermittent fasting, et cetera, et cetera. And there's research to back up a lot of things. And I could probably find research to back up almost anything. Someone's probably done it and found like something. Does it mean it's sound? Not always. I'm not saying intermittent fasting research isn't sound. I'm just saying, like, again, let me just throw out a statistic here. I think, so it's very hard to qualify for an eating disorder according to the DSM. There's certain criterion that one needs to be bulimic or anorexic or binge eating disorder, orthorexia, or the obsession with eating healthy, which might have applied to me at one time, isn't included in the DSM as of yet, the DSM-5. But there's this whole spectrum outside of those, one might call disordered eating, that supposedly 60 to 75% of us have.
I believe it.
Right. I mean, we're marinated in all kinds of different information. Mm-hmm. And so it's hard to know what's up. So again, if you're asking like what times of day, I would want to know like your relationship with food, like where is this coming from? Because the advising of someone who is engaged in disordered eating, not saying anyone here is, would be problematic.
Right.
Yeah. And would encourage more of that like nitpicking and rigidity around food. And I see a couple more, like a big question here.
Yeah, let's start with Sophie. Whenever I eat what I deem poor choices, we all do that. Literally did that today.
Right, 60 to 75%.
Yes, I spiral into negative thought patterns. Yes. Even though we certainly have bigger things to worry about, how do I start to deal with the guilt? That's a really great question.
Oh. This is the question of all questions. Mm-hmm. And I want to just invite, first of all, I want to hold space for that and just like, thank you for sharing and for being vulnerably offering that for all of us to sit with, because we all probably relate.
100%.
And I just,
I definitely 100% relate.
Right, I do too. Mm-hmm. And I just want to say, if we can find space to invite self-compassion in, that can be a starting point. And then starting to connect with what do I want versus what should. There's a lot of shoulds out there, including like anything I Google. Like I can find articles and different influencers, different wellness coaches, different nutritionists who say a lot of different things. And so that can be overwhelming. And it can only kind of like support the cycle of shame. So I'm also really conscious that there's a cycle, and there's a lot of morality around food that I've learned.
Yeah.
There's a good, a bad, there's a right way. And it's almost like rooted in this religious sort of like, is it from our Puritan work ethic? And I think if you search, you'll find. I don't want to spoiler alert, but like, yes, it's a lot of these roots are deeply embedded in our American culture. And not all of American culture accepted all people at at the start of it. So
Yeah.
this is why the intersectional approach for me is really important.
Yeah. Can you speak more about that? Because I feel like that's such a really great thing to talk about. The way that we eat, I know, can relate to like the type of culture that you're in, or the, you know, like what is actually in your DNA. I feel like there's all these different things that are a part of how to stay healthy and balanced, and I feel like that probably influences the work that you do too. I definitely want to hear more about that.
Well, thanks. So my practice is emerging in this zone. I'm not like an intersectional feminism expert or anything, but for me, it has been really nourishing to explore with this lens, nutrition or my food relationship. And what I've noticed is when I start to identify different systems of oppression and how they've affected me as a body, me as a person who identifies as a woman, me as a woman of color, me as a Hawaii, you know, all of these different identities.
Yeah.
I see ways of eating that I practiced in the past as really relating to my wanting to assimilate
Oh my
or
God,
belong.
I was literally just thinking that when you said that. I remember being a kid and being so embarrassed that my parents were packing me like Mexican meals. And I'm sure my sister in this chat can relate to that. But we would beg our parents to buy those shitty ass corn dogs from Costco. And it was because I wanted to fit in.
100%.
And yeah, it was just like us eating all of the, you know, nasty food in the 90s that you would see on television, because that was what it meant to be American. Oh my God, girl. See, yep.
Yes.
I totally feel that. That is so crazy. And I do find myself now, as I'm older, rediscovering how beautiful and amazing the food from my culture actually is. And it's nourishing me in ways that I had not nourished myself for, you know, 20, 30 years.
That is so beautiful. And I think that's a real, well, there's an invitation for us all right now is to consider, like, how do we want to move forward with a dominant culture, a dominant wellness culture, a dominant nutrition culture telling us all of a variety of different diverse peoples how to do it.
That's
when
true.
we know that there are different people and there have to be different ways of being. And I'll throw this radical thought out there too. Health is an individual's paradigm choice. What you consider healthy for you might be completely different than what someone else considers as health.
Right.
And I'd really like to hold space for that and sort of like play with that against the medical field, you know, I mean, within reason. And also, no one needs to pursue health as like the best thing in the world to do. I mean, there are many people who have had short, amazing lives who have contributed, you know, to our society and related to people in ways that we'll never forget. So just food for thought.
Yeah. Literally. If anybody that just joined the chat has any questions for us, nutrition, food related, please go ahead and comment. We'll see them, or you could submit a question down below where the little question mark is.
I have two questions that came through earlier from my that I can share at any point. That I wrote them down on my little post-it.
Yeah, let's go for it now, girl.
Okay. I have one, which was, what are the best books or readings to help overcome disordered eating?
Ooh,
so juicy. And again, I don't know, I'm not like the expert on eating disorders. I'm going to have a master's hopefully in June. And I'm really curious about disordered eating and how the spectrum, and especially for women of color, people of color. So I'm going to throw out some books that helped me that I really love, and maybe this person or maybe people will benefit from knowing them.
Awesome.
I have them all stacked up right here. So The first one is Body Respect by Lindo Bacon and Lucy Aphramore. And this is a really great book. And I'm just going to rattle them off and not like do a book talk because my old teacher self wants to be like, and this, and like, but we don't have time. The second, this is The Body Is Not an Apology by Sonia Renee Taylor. Incredible. Like my whole like profile for my personal page is inspired by her work, like the power of radical self-love.
Yeah.
This one's a lot more academic, but it's so important for right now. It's called Fearing the Black Body, the Racial Origins of Fat Phobia. So just understanding like why are people in our culture so afraid of being fat, and how that played a role in sort of elevating one type of person and sort of suppressing other types of people, Black people.
Yeah.
And I have two more. This one, The Eating Instinct, Food Culture, Body Image, and Guilt in America by Virginia Soul Smith. Super cute cover, really good. And then this one's a little out there and it's a little old. It's like 25 plus years old, but it's called Eating in the Light of the Moon: How Women Can Transform Their Relationships with Food Through Myths, Metaphors, and Storytelling. And it's kind of cute and interesting if you're a metaphorical person like me and like literature.
Yeah. Love. These are so many. I'm going to have to read all of them.
Oh, one more.
Yeah.
I haven't finished reading it, but Anti-Diet by Christy Harrison. She also has a podcast called the Food Psych podcast. I am not through this yet, but it is blowing my mind, and it's pretty great.
Amazing. We have a follow-up question from Sophie. You mentioned that everyone's relationship with food is a blend of family, culture, environment. How would you recommend beginning to unpack your food relationship?
With someone you feel safe with, with an objective listener, and maybe not within the context of the family or familiar culture or environment, maybe someone objective. And starting there. And sometimes it takes a little bit to find that person. Oftentimes we get into relationships around the water cooler at work or at school, and it's based on sort of checking in each other on like, not food policing, but sort of like wellness policing. And so we need to really look for people who we can feel safe with exploring this.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's especially difficult for women because we're already hard on ourselves. And I know for me, a lot of my early female relationships were about us checking in on like, hey, are you making sure you don't eat a lot? You know, you're looking a little thick. And I grew up in the early, 90s, 2000s. So the ideal woman was not someone that looked like me at all. It was someone that had no fat anywhere on her body. And so that was the ideal that I was preparing myself to become. So when you mentioned like the awakening that you had when you're going through puberty, I had that moment, and I just remember feeling so terrible about myself and about eating all the food that I wanted. And I know I'm not the only person that grew up that way.
You are not.
Yeah, especially not the only, brown woman. But I'm also very excited about times now, because now all of a sudden, like, our image of beauty is transforming. And there's more space for different types of beauty. And that makes me so excited. Like, I never thought that I would be living in an age where people were saying that curvy is beautiful. Like, period.
Period.
That blows my mind.
I still feed my tween self, my adolescent self, those images, and she fucking loves it. Like, yeah. I find those things, and this is another good comment to just realize that we can feed ourselves. We can choose the media we feed ourselves now. Yes. We can unfollow and we can follow things that really inspire us, things that our inner children, teenagers need to see and have been hungry for. We can feed ourselves images of ourselves and our loved ones, being glorious.
Yes. 100%.
And surviving.
Yeah. Did you say you had another question from someone?
Oh, yes, I do. Yeah. Okay. This one is, do you have a go-to favorite meal when you don't have energy to fancy cook.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yes, the microwave is my friend, especially during school, and
Oh,
I'm a huge fan of anything like chips, cheese, and then I'll just go for the jars in the fridge. Like, do we have kimchi? Like, can I chop that up? Like, what can I throw on there and like microwave or put the kimchi on after so the probiotics are still there, whatever.
yeah.
But yeah, I love like a version of nachos with whatever we have on hand.
Oh, that sounds so good. Okay. So as a woman of color, how has your culture directly influenced the work that you do?
Wow. I am still on my journey to explore my culture. I have to say, I grew up in Hawaii, and my childhood and my schooling, I really felt like it was a push to assimilate into dominant culture and
Yeah.
then go get educated here on the mainland, and here I am. So I am in this moment where I'm reclaiming and exploring some of my roots, such as like Native Hawaiian culture. That
Mhm.
is part of who I am, but I don't embody it the way that I want to, and I'm still on that journey. Much of that culture was kept from me and my people and my relatives, and it wasn't a good thing to be. When my dad and them were growing up, it was like, we need to speak proper English. He always said, his parents really emphasized this. So now, thankfully, um, people have held on to the language, and I can go back and learn how to speak Hawaiian and Olelo Hawaii, and I need to, and that's part of my journey too. I'll be seeking that and learning and growing as I go, and hopefully that will only just continue to help me expand the way that I hold my practice and intersectionality and how I really want to champion women of color and of different cultures so that we can all feel more liberated and accepted for ourselves, for our future,
Yes.
for everyone. Yeah.
Especially the future.
Oh,
Future will be bright. Um, uh, I think like you touched upon something that a lot of people have been talking about, which is like associating nutrition, just the idea of nutrition with specifically like white culture, not necessarily black and brown culture. I think there's this idea that it takes a lot of money in order to become educated about nutrition and receive, the things that you need. And I'd like to just talk about like how we can break that down, because I know now that that isn't true, that
mm.
there is definitely space for us to get educated and to live, nutritious, nourished lives, because our lives are important too.
Yes. Well, I think what you brought up is a great opportunity to sort of introduce to you this concept of social determinants of health.
Mm,
It's complicated, and it's not like always a feel good concept. But one thing I learned in studying nutrition, we studied food policy and community nutrition, and there's some disparate health disparities, birth outcomes in Black women, deaths that occur more for people of color due to disease, et cetera, et cetera.
yes.
And what is true and what the research shows is that social determinants of health, oppression, your built environment that you live around, how you weather racism every day, your neighborhood, your access to groceries, all these things actually are more influential on your nutritional status and your well-being than your individual choices. Think
Mm,
about like, how do you make an individual choice if you have all these barriers to
yeah,
access? So, I mean, it's tough because it's like, I don't want to take the steam out of people wanting to make these changes for their health. I think
totally.
everyone deserves the right to make changes that they want to make to their health. But I just want to hold that and say, like, zip codes can determine lifespan. Like, you can look up by zip code where people live the longest.
Yeah.
And a lot of that has to do with distribution of wealth. So that's kind of radical, but that's what I've learned. I didn't seek to learn it, I just learned it.
No, it makes a lot of
It's
sense.
blowing my mind.
It makes a lot of sense. I think like I can only, like I said, I can only speak from my own experience, but when I was growing up, we had, you know, a corner market, but there wasn't a lot, which is like a bodega. We don't call them bodegas in California, but it was a corner market.
Yeah, corner store.
And you know, a lot of the foods we had were Mexican and Chinese, because that was primarily the community that I lived around. But you know, we were lower income people hanging out. And the types of food were not necessarily like fresh produce. It was usually just like a bunch of junk food that we all grew up eating. You know, like all the neighborhood kids would hang out by the market and eat. Yeah, exactly. Food desserts.
Food deserts.
Food deserts.
She's saying, yeah.
That is what it's called. It is called food desert. But there wasn't really healthy food within, you know, a couple mile radius of our neighborhood, so it wasn't easily accessible. So I totally understand that.
Some activists prefer the term food apartheid.
Food apartheid. Wow. Yeah.
Just because the desert, it kind of like seems like it's a naturally occurring thing,
Yeah.
where these are not necessarily naturally occurring.
You're right. We have another question, Callie. I know it always gets cut off, but I'm trying to be healthier. Yes. I'm always am interested, but I'm here.
So overwhelmed when I look for recipes, maybe?
Callie, do you want to copy and paste your question
Yeah.
into the comments? So
I think it's recipes. That'd be great. Oh, hey, my brother's on. What's up, Jonah? Yeah. That is an awesome vessel you're drinking from.
Oh my God.
Yes.
If anyone does ceramics, I need some cups up in here.
I love it.
I'll represent you.
Is Callie there? Or is she typing?
I think she's typing.
Okay, good. Yeah, absolutely. But you're asking about like how to dispel this myth that like nutrition, it can be for all of us. I would just say, are we getting enough food? Are we feeding ourselves? Are we connected to people? Are we experiencing joy? If we start there and we know that that's enough, like we're enough, we've survived, we are here, how do we want to move forward?
Yeah.
I think that's the thing to remember.
Got it. Priscilla says that she thinks what she's trying to say is she's overwhelmed finding recipes. Yes.
Oh, I mean, there are so many, the internet, like there's so many recipes out there. And I want to just say, like, there's not necessarily a wrong or a right way to do any of them. It's just you and your personal choice. And each individual has different needs and things that they're attuned to. So I would say find someone you want to stick with for a while to follow the recipes of, and like trial and error, you know, do they work for you? Don't they? Like, take every expert with a grain of salt and really trust your gut and yourself.
Would you say, like, if someone's like, let's say they're going through that process of, I know a lot of people are just learning how to cook right now.
Nice, yeah.
Would you tell people to sort of like pay attention to the way that their body feels in order to see if something is good or not for them? I think people are trying to understand, like, even though I'm not directly working with a nutritionist right now, like, how do I know what is good for my body? Like, what is something that I can look for?
Yeah, this is a complicated question because there could be things that could interrupt someone's body's ability to digest it or to like absorb it. There could be things going on with each individual. So there's a trust your gut, but like that might not work for everyone, depending if there's, you know, if they're anxious, then nothing may be digested because we're freaking out right now and we're stressed. So just having compassion for yourself and knowing that taking it moment by moment, meal by meal, and allowing yourself to relax and not be so like on your own back about it can really help. Just allowing, like right now especially, is not the time for us to be nitpicking.
You're right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Callie, she's back.
Oh,
Um,
hey.
I deal with a lot of clients with acne, sometimes diet related, hormones, gut health, etc. Do you know about probiotics and if people need to change their probiotics regularly?
Oh, yeah, I'm not an expert on probiotics, and I know that this is also the gut microbiome is like an emerging area of research.
Mhm.
So I would say I don't know. But it's fascinating. It's fascinating to think about. And yes, I know that a lot of immunity is in the gut and due to the gut microbiome. So this will be really fascinating to look at going forward.
Is
And
that
I
is that a space that a nutritionist would understand? Or okay,
lots of nutritionists want to specialize in gut health.
got,
A lot of the people I'm in school with are very interested in that.
yeah,
So there'll be some of us out there.
yeah. I've been reading about that. It's like the new frontier.
It is, right? It's
Yeah.
the new old frontier that's always been there.
It's so true.
There
Uh,
was a question I think Sophie had
yeah, so
before. Did we
follow up.
talk about that one?
No. Okay, so
So,
we'll read Sophie's follow-up, and then if anybody has, we'll take one or two more questions, and then I'll let this beautiful lady go. Sophie, so health outcomes are deeply tied to greater cultural inequalities, yes. What do you see as a few bigger policy or cultural changes that need to happen to start to fix these disparities in health outcomes?
Sophie, do you have a talk show? Because you
I
should,
know,
because these
girl.
are
Should we
awesome.
get you on next
I've always wanted to be on Oprah. No. Um,
time?
I feel like there are lots of ways to disrupt the system, to sort of shift things, and I think all of them are welcome. But I would say I'm curious about how we can sort of shift the power of who makes all the food. And this is a weird time to talk about it because right now we're all inside and we're depending upon certain resource streams and certain grocery stores and things. So maybe not the time to look at that. But overall, I would say like wealth distribution would be great. If
Mhm.
we look at like the distribution of wealth and how our middle class has gotten smaller and smaller, and then there's like the 1% that has like 40 times the wealth of like the middle class. Yeah, it's policies like that. I mean, that's the fun thing about food is it goes into every every single
Every part of
part
our
of being human, like
Mhm.
politics, etc.
Callie has a follow-up. Uh,
Callie.
she says for hormones, I always recommend spearmint tea and zinc
Mm.
to eliminate acne-causing bacteria. She did talk about this before. Spearmint tea helps lower androgen levels. Is there anything else I'm missing?
I mean, I think a deep dive into each client's nutritional status could be interesting rather than like doing a one size fits all. Like, I think you found something that maybe seems to work for most, but I would be interested in what all else people have going on besides, just throwing one thing at them. That's my perspective. Not saying like what you're doing is not awesome for you and your clients, but I'm insatiably curious about, yeah, each individual's specific issues and yeah.
Awesome. We'll stay on for 2 more minutes. If
Yeah,
anybody has any more questions, now's the time.
it's the time.
Drop them in. How are you handling, this moment right now?
Oh, Kelly says she always tells people it's individual. Yeah. How I'm handling this moment, I'm just coping just like the rest of us. So
Yeah.
much has shifted to online. I took 2 classes this quarter. This is my last quarter of my program that were in the kitchen on purpose because I wanted to just make and like get my hands dirty and plate things pretty and eat with my classmates. And now I'm gonna have to do videos of it in my kitchen and like post more and comment on 13 other people's videos. And it's just like, it's gonna be fine. And I'm gonna learn so many skills, but it's not the same.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
when is your program over?
Should be done in June.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Well, definitely hit us up after that. I want to see like everything that you've learned since today.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for your interest. And thank you so much for being curious about me.
Yes, and I think everyone here Hopefully you were able to learn something new. Thank you for spending another 30 minutes with us at Hey Sis World. We're definitely going to do this again. We got another one coming up on Friday. Daphne, thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully we'll talk to you again.
Yes.
After June.
Sounds good.
Good luck on your studies and everything, and let us know about all the delicious food that you'll be making in quarantine.
All right. Y'all take care of yourselves and allow no judgment.
Exactly. Bye, guys.
Okay, bye.